some tree wrapping the bushes and lighting them up for Christmas. It's a nice little look. And then the tree wrapping the lights around the tree makes it look really nice. Down here at the Mag Mile, but Magnificent Mile, it works with the realtors. It works with the businesses on the Magnificent Mile, but it doesn't work with the property managers. And that means it doesn't work with the buildings that are residential, so it can't coordinate that. But they could. And so the Magnificent Mile could work with the buildings like this one right here, and what they do right here on the corner of Oak and that. If the Magnificent Mile Association work with the property manager of that building, that's all residential. On the first floor it has, I think, some commercial, but all above it's residential. And so the Magnificent Mile would work with the residents. There's many residents, like here, 900 Michigan, and up above, they're, I think, residents. I think this is where Oprah used to live, at 900 Michigan. She had a penthouse. But there are residents above all this, and the Magnificent Mile Association, which I used to be a official guest. Not a member. I didn't officially join, but I was an official guest. Jack and many others would just invite me to the events. So I didn't have to join. They liked me coming and sharing thoughts with them. So they were really friendly, and they took care of my mother and that at Macy's for Christmas, at Oak Room or whatever. My mother and my sister-in-law and her daughter. But again, like Michigan right here, this John Hancock, which is now 360, up above, like my friend Irene used to live up there. I've been in the residence, and there's a lot of residents here, but they don't work with the property managers, and so they don't have the ability to coordinate things between commercial and residential in this area. Like, don't panic. Yeah, why should it be a panic? The baby's a blessing. If women understand how it helps reset their brain and reset their dynamics, and if they understood that, then they would understand that carrying the baby to full term is truly a blessing. No matter how it arrived, accidentally, on purpose, through, like my friend Mary, she was raped. It didn't matter. The baby itself is still a blessing. So, and it's not like you're going to conceive out of being raped, right? But it does happen sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't. But they aren't able, and the lights here down the Mag Mile, the trees, they aren't able to, Victoria's Secrets, coordinate between the commercial and residential here. So the Magnificent Mile needs to get into the property managers that do the residential, and that way they're in the associations, and they can coordinate between the commercial businesses and the property managers who manage the residential, and they can all be on one page, making this area great. But it doesn't matter what area you're in. You could be New York City or Rodeo Drive, and there are residents there, and you want to be able to coordinate. Or like in the Glen, in Glenview, they converted Naval Base into a residential area and, commercial area where they have restaurants and shopping and so on. Well, they can have an association, of the Glen, and it coordinates the commercial and residential of the people working through the property managers. Now in the Glen, they have private houses, but those houses are part of a housing association. And so that's the property manager. And so they work with, certain improvements. And the reason you want to have an association, even with just homeowners, let's take out the buildings, right? You have Deerfield and you have individual homes. Well, you're on the same block or the same area, a few blocks, like square block. Well, this way you can coordinate your effort with City Hall, like the town of Deerfield, the mayor's office and that. What you need for your area related to the street, related to the sidewalks, sewer systems, water systems. So you can send a cohesive message to the village. Like here, you have aldermanic wards, and in the wards you have these residents. So you have these property associations, but they can be coordinated under the Magnificent Mile, and the Magnificent Mile represents both the commercial and the residential, and they send the message to the alderman's office. And so they can work with both the commercial and residential and funnel that into the alderman's office in a cohesive message. So that area of residents, and then you have the Gold Coast, it's the same thing with their residential and their commercial, and they're part of, say, the Gold Coast Association. And so you have the property managers property managers need to send out to the residents. I don't care about those people anymore. The Chicago police can take care of them. Urban Ministry, like I said, I gave you the taxi cab services, but you think Urban Ministry would work with the Department of Human Services. The Department of Human Services, working with Urban Ministries, Pacific Gardens, and so on, coordinating it with the Salvation Army, PADS, and so on, creating this coalition of public and private. So the Department of Human Services works with these organizations like Alexian Brothers, and they know they have their charitable. So Alexian Brothers has the forms they'll fill out, and you can get treatment without Medicaid. It's all through their charity, and you don't need Medicaid. So I went to Alexian Brothers, and through their charity, they take care of the treatment. The charity pays for the outpatient office visits. I didn't have Medicaid or county care. It was through the Alexian Brother charity, like the Catholic charities. So the Department of Human Resources, or Human Services, I should say, which I used to call, and they have a van, they pick up people, and they can coordinate with them with night ministries, and night ministries can give them the medical exams, and they can coordinate night ministries with Alexian Brothers, and people from Alexian Brothers. Now they're in the burbs. Alexian Brothers should open up in Chicago. Truly, Alexian Brothers should open up a hospital in the city of Chicago. And so they should expand into the city of Chicago. Now, I don't know exactly where, but they can work together with Night Ministries, Alexian Brothers, and their charitable program. Now, Lutheran General is another one that has a charitable program. So Lutheran General has their own internal charitable program, and through it, it will take care of medical bills related. So again, Lutheran General Hospital, which is in Park Ridge, has its own charitable program. And they take care of medical bills for people. Now again, you would think Night Ministry would know all this, right? Tapping into these Christian hospitals, per se. It's Lutheran General. That's where my sister had her kids. All her kids were born at Lutheran General, a Lutheran hospital. We're Lutheran. And she had her kids, by default, all were born at Lutheran General. I think all 8 kids were born at Lutheran General, a Lutheran hospital. And funny, my first breakdown, that's where I went. My sister took me to, and the doctors at Lutheran General wanted me to go home. Now, they should have recommended outpatient to my sister, and it would have solved the problem. But the doctor didn't recommend outpatient. He just told me I don't need it and just to go home. But a compromise with my sister would have been just telling her he can just establish an outpatient relationship. But the doctor did not want me to go into the mental health facility. And he told my sister is wrong. And he told her that. And he told me that. And that I should just go home. And he adamantly stated it many times that I should not go in. I should just go home. And what would have happened? I would have never been on the antipsychotics. Because it all started from Lake County Health, where I went in. See, I was in Cook County, but they shipped me up to Lake County. So when I went in to the Lake County Department of Health. So Park Ridge Lutheran General shipped me from there to Lake County Department of Health. And at the Lake County Department of Health, they're the ones that's prescribed me the lithium and antipsychotics. And that's when things got really bad for me. Not better, bad. Massive side effects. And so they didn't do anything to help me. They did unbelievable damage to me. They truly didn't do anything to help me. If they did and settled things down, it would have been great. I would have got on them, and then all that, noise would have disappeared, and things would have been great. And I could have handled the other issues with going to the gym and many other things, but it didn't. And it gave me chronic fatigue, and chronic fatigue deals with what? Excessive weight gain. And so, no, it didn't do anything for me. It seriously damaged me. But side point I'm talking about is Night Ministry is supposed to have a list of all these hospitals and their charitable programs. And if they need to, they can send somebody, truly, as I did the air flights. I showed you, and you don't know about this, but there are charities that cover medical flights. So if you need to go from Chicago to the Mayo Clinic in Cleveland, say, they will cover the cost of the flight from here to Cleveland, and then you check in with the Mayo Clinic in Cleveland, and the Mayo Clinic has their financial assistance that will help you with the cost of getting treated at the Mayo Clinic. Now, this should all be under night ministry, right? You would think if I was running night ministry, it's a medical service, I would be coordinating. And then night ministry can work with all the free clinics, which it didn't work with all the free clinics, which I showed Julie Cho. But night ministry is a mobile hospital, basically, a mobile care unit, and it goes out and it addresses issues. So these people on the street, it would address, but it also needs a psychologist to work with them or a therapist to go out with them so they can get physical evaluations, but also they can get mental evaluations. And they can give them different types of quick cognitive tests. See if they're experiencing Alzheimer's or dementia or some other types of psychotic. There are very simple tests. You can even give them the imaging test or the ink blots. It gives you an idea of their state of mind. But ink blots can be used for cognition as well. So it's not only to see the state of mind, what you're thinking, but it can also be cognition, how your mind is working or isn't working. So you can use ink blots to see if they recognize certain things. Truly, you know they're in there. Remember the picture that if you look at it, you can find it was this thing that went around, and I found it, and you can find this image in it, but you have to visualize it right. And the whole point is to see if their cognition is working. So you can rearrange ink blocks to test cognition to see if they have pre-dementia, Alzheimer's, or other cognitive impairments, because they won't be able to process the imaging correctly. That's one way. Then you can test sound, and that's another way with cognition. Dyslexics have a problem processing sound, and they mix things up visually as well. But these are cognition tests to see. And so you can show them a few different ink blots that test cognition, and you can see if they're dyslexic with the ink blot. And then you just have certain sounds, and you can set up a sound spectrum that can test cognition. So you can say A, B, C, the sound goes out A, B, C, and they repeat it, A, B, C, and then you speed it up, A, B, C, but you use different letters, E, F, G, and see if they catch it. So see if the hearing to the brain is working correctly. You know how they have the vision test and they say read line 5, and you're like A, B, C, D, E, F, 3, 2, 5. Okay, then read above it, and it has different, then read below it. And that's what you're doing with the hearing. You're not only testing range, but they don't test speed, and you can do this visually where you move images faster across and see if they recognize them. And this tests cognition, because if they don't catch the image, then there's something going on with the visual to the brain, and they're having a problem processing information. They should process it at a certain speed if the brain is operating correctly. So it's like the stoplight. You recognize it and you process it at a certain rate. So you know they're not impaired that way. And then you can get into more complex. But you can do that with letters and numbers with sound. It's just speaking 75321. And then they repeat back 75321. And so that means they hear it right. And then you can speed it up even further. And you can see how their ability to process information, if they can hear the number set and repeat the number set back to you. And so you're looking for their ability to recognize and process information. Or you can do it a little bit more complex. 2 plus 2 is 4. And you can make an A plus B a C. A plus B equals C. But these are things that you can do to test cognition. And so you can use the ink blots and you can use the sound to test cognition. And then you see physically, you can use different tones and ask them what they hear. So if you want to hear if they're hearing sounds or anything, all you have to do is give them certain sounds. And you want to see if the brain is processing the sound right. So give them the bathroom fan sound. And see if they hear voices. Now, you're not planting the voices. It's just a simple sound. Like I can get the airplane engine sound on my thing. And so you want to hear if they just hear the airplane engine, or is when they hear the airplane engine, is it translating into different voices? And so you know it's pure and it's not in there. So you're not embedding anything. You're not trying to trick them. This is not a tricking them thing. You don't embed the sound to see if they can recognize the sound in there. It's the pure sound with nothing embedded. If you want, when somebody's healthy, you can embed the sound and see if they can recognize the sound being embedded or the voice being embedded within. But you're not testing somebody who wants you training them to distinguish things. That's more advanced hearing, and you can do that when somebody's healthy. And you can put stuff in there and say, can you separate out this sound? And the brain will get trained to separate out the voices in the background. Say you're training somebody like a police officer, and you want them to be able to distinguish voices in the background. So you have, the sound of the train. And then in that, you're like, hey, Jimmy, what's up? And you embed it in the as the train passes, and embed it in there, truly, with it, blended in, is, hey, Jimmy, what's up? And you want to see if they can pick that out. And you're going to keep on running it until they can pick it out and distinguish and the brain will separate out the from the hey Jimmy what's up. And now they can separate out these sounds distinctively from one another. So this is advanced hearing. training. And the brain will do this. It will scrub one sound and separate it from another sound, but you need to create the neural pathways to unwind the distinct sounds and be able to separate them out. But that's totally different. What you're doing is just playing a certain sound, and when you play that sound, you're seeing if they hear anything in the background that you know is not there. Now you know the cognitive wiring is off. They're hearing sounds that they shouldn't hear because you put together the sound and you know it's pure. So there's no like Mr. Roboto and playing it backwards and whatever, the whole big thing about hidden messages, playing it backwards, music. Now, it's a nice way if you're a spy agency to send communication because you play it normally, any song or video, and they know that just to play it backwards, or you can hide it by speeding it up. So it's words that sound normal, and then you speed up the rate of the words, frontwards or backwards if you're playing it, and you have to speed it up to a certain pace or slow it down to a certain pace. And when you do that, it changes what you hear. So it's a way to embed messages. So they had, we used to play records backwards because certain, groups were putting satanic messages in the album when you played it backwards, which actually was not true. But again, it is a way to embed messages in normal messages. But we're getting here with night ministry and checking for cognitive faculty. And this is a way to know if there's an issue going on, and you go through these sounds and you know they're pure, and if they hear something other, and you tell them, do you hear anything? You have to be identified, and do you hear voices? And you have to ask them the question. Or if you want to, and it's with a brain scan, then you can do it. If you're using some kind of scan, you can see the activity in a certain area of the brain, the motor cortex or whatever, and how it's reacting to it. That's a little bit different, but they should be able to respond to you. I mean, anyone, I've been in the facility, they'll respond and answer the question on the run the sounds, and you tell me what you hear, and if you hear voices in there. Now, sometimes embedding the thought might trigger it. And so you're trying to do like a double blind. And so you run the sound. And this is where you can run it with voices embedded. You run it without, and then you run it with, and see what they say. You run the sound without, and they say they don't hear anything, and then you run it with, and they say they do hear things. Then you're good. They told you the truth. But again, you run it, and it's a way to cross-reference and cross-check. But if they tell you they don't hear any sounds and they want no sounds, and they tell you they don't hear any, then you might have to look into their hearing, and they might have some hearing deficit within a range or something, and maybe that's why they're not hearing it. Because but if you want to, you can put it at different ranges, the voices within the fan, and then you embed in different ranges, and You can see if they're hearing it at different ranges, so you can check their hearing, but also seeing if they recognize. But again, this is the test cognition. You're trying to help the person and distinguish if they're giving you the right information, because maybe they just don't want to seem crazy, right? The whole stigma about having it, you're trying to fix the issue, but there might be a trust barrier. So you have to understand that. Sometimes people don't want to let down the wall and open up to you. So all you're doing is trying to test. And so when they hear that normal sound that's pure, and they say, hey, I'm hearing things. Okay, what are you hearing? And then you know that the audible nerve with the brain is not processing the information correctly. And basically the words that they're hearing, and you got to get the words they're hearing, because that tells you how it's converting the information. It's taking that sound, which has no embedded words, and taking it and converting it into words. And that tells you what exactly is going on with the neural wiring. It's taking something and creating something from nothing. And so now you know the words do matter. And so I know this through my first experience. I go through a clinician check of myself. So this is all God preparing me. And so I analyze and I study and I know these things so I can know the difference. So God taught me how I can tell inside voices from outside voices and be able to tell the difference. And it was all in preparation. So making sure I know when people are messing with me. So I'm highly well prepared. And so I know when things aren't right. And no one better to be trained by but God, who knows everything and anything you could do. And no matter how you do it, he already knows it. So anyways, this is my whole diagnostic I go through. And I've been taught and prepared to analyze these things. And I was told to share this with you so you can help solve problems, not hurt me and make my life worse by implanting or doing these things on purpose to me, but solving other people's problems with their misunderstanding of the sounds. So again, you have to ask them when they hear these things exactly what they're hearing, and it's telling you how things are incorrectly wired. And you have to get healthy people and watch the brain with healthy people and tell them, what do you hear? I hear, truly. And I hear just the sound of a vacuum, say, or the sound of a airplane engine. And can you replicate that sound for me somewhat? And I'm going to play it to you, and you're going to go ahead and you move this up and down, and you tell me what you hear. And you allow them to move it. That's what they hear. Because you want to see what's going on in the brain coordinating with the sound. And you want them to play with it. You play it for them and see what's going on, and then they mix it and going on, because you want to see what frequencies that you're putting out to what frequencies they're interpreting. It's a comparison and contrast. And so, do they hit the same area, the same range that you were, or are they higher or lower? But you get this variation, and then as you test people over time, you can see if people interpret that sound more high or more low, or do they get it correct. And you're looking at the brain and the neural pathways that get lit up when they hear it. And so from that, you can see what's going on with the wiring. Now, you can go back and cross-reference with somebody hearing voices. And now you know the neuroplasty that's having the problem. And it's taking in the information and it's converting it, and you know exactly what's going on. And you know, okay, we need to rework this, and now this is sound therapy, and we can rework this out. So it's not a guess. It's an exact science. And so, okay, you're hearing this, so we need to rebuild these pathways because they're damaged. And so we have to figure out how we're going to move around this. So it's not the cross-canceling, but it's repairing the damage. And so you're going to go in and you're going to fix the damage by rewiring the neural pathways to recognize the sound properly. And so you're going to ask them, do you hear more voices or less voices? And you're going to play it. You know they heard the voices, and so you're going to play higher and lower, and then you're going to play different frequencies the same. And so you want to see the range of where they're hearing the voices, the spectrum. So above this spectrum they don't, below this spectrum they don't. Okay, within this range they do. So now we know we have to correct it within this range. And so we need to figure out how we can change their processing, rewiring their processing in this spectrum. This is where this problem is, and we need to rewire it. Now, you could put a hearing aid in, and it takes the sound in and moves it above and below that spectrum. So they never hear the spectrum where they hear voices. Because you know if you take it and move it to a lower spectrum, they don't hear it. They hear whatever it should hear. And if you move it to a higher spectrum, they hear whatever they should hear. It's only within this spectrum. And it can be reversed. The middle could be where they hear nothing, and the ends, and you funnel it into the middle. You take whatever it is, and you put it in that sound in the middle. So the hearing aid adjusts it for them and puts it in a spectrum that they don't hear these voices anymore. So again, that brings it into that spectrum. The hearing aid takes it in one spectrum and transitions it into another spectrum, and no longer they're hearing voices. So that's a short-term solution while you're working on. You want to fix the problem. So it's not you give up and you're like, okay, you just wear the hearing aid and you're good for the rest of your life. No, that's a bridge to get stability. So when they come in, you can work on the brain repairing the issue. Because if you don't, then you get atrophy and things can get worse. You don't want things to get worse. You don't want it to atrophy and move into that range as well. So it can expand the ranges that is causing problems. So the hearing aid is just a bridge to give mental stability for the period of time while you work and try to fix the neural pathways. Fix them as much as possible, and then just keep on doing the exercises to keep them stable as possible for as long as possible so the situation doesn't deteriorate. And they might use the hearing aid, still need it in some capacity because you can't totally fix it, but the hearing aid can open up to a broader range. It doesn't need to convert it to a narrow range. So again, they have more spectrum hearing, which is better for them as well. So it's like the pellet, and you neutralize it and everything tastes the same. That's not good, because that causes the brain to what? Deteriorate. You want a good sense of smell and taste and all of that to keep the brain fully spectrum, healthy. If not, and the taste starts going away, well, then it's going to deteriorate. The brain's going to deteriorate. That area is going to atrophy. And you're only going to be left with a limited amount, and that area might decay as well. So you want to prevent the decay. So you want to keep as much spectrum open as possible. And they do the work every so often, and you might have physical therapy for the rest of your life. And you have to do this therapy, and it can be web-based or whatever. You come in, but they might have to do it, once a month, once a week for the rest of their life to keep on working on it so they don't deteriorate. So they maintain as much full spectrum living as possible. So again, you can solve these problems and find a cure, and eventually we will find a cure for it all. And it's both neuroplasty with drug cocktail training, true. So it can be dietary, pharmaceutical, exercise, audible. So again, you might pair up a cocktail of things to solve the problem. So again, you can solve the problem, and you need to work on this, and it's never good enough. So there is no good enough. You're always perfecting, you're always refining, you're always getting it better. It is never good enough. And that propels everything forward, because they want to find greater and greater and greater excellence. And they can, as we get into the quantum realm anatomy, start understanding the brain and looking at it in these levels, areas that we've never looked in it before. Then we will be able to constantly refine these things and constantly help people and make them more and more whole. You think they're whole, but they're not truly whole. So you keep on working on it and minimizing the damage and minimizing the damage and minimizing, because as we find out that what we thought we repaired wasn't repaired, as we get better at analyzing the cells in that, we find these smaller areas of damage, and you will find them, and you keep on working it to keep on getting it down less and 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 less. You're not supposed to be desecrating the flesh. It is unholy, and what you've done to me, you will burn for eternal damnation. you weren't allowed to desecrate my flesh in any way, shape, or form. And anything that impairs me is condemned. So you can't desecrate my flesh. He doesn't care what reason is, national defense or anything else. You desecrate me and everybody involved is burning. You desecrate me in any way, shape, or form. You bring on disease to me. You bring on downturn to me. And any, truly, whether it's mental, financial, spiritual, or any form, the relationships you destroyed, you're going to perish. He doesn't care your rationale. You're supposed to take a human and make them better, not take a human and destroy them. You're supposed to take a good people. What do we do in prison? We call it rehabilitation, right? We take a human, we bring them in, and we rehabilitate them. We don't take them in and destroy them. We take them in, and the whole purpose of it is a rehabilitation institution. So you've moved against everything that's been created, taking somebody in and making them better. What do you think they do with Olympians, right? What do you think they do in a martial arts program? You take somebody in as a white belt, and then you move them up to yellow belt. Why? Because they've improved their physical ability. And then you move them from yellow, and now you can have sashes. Like at white belt, you have to get the 3 color wraps, white, blue, yellow, to be able to advance. And it's the same thing. You break down the katas or the forms in segments, 3 segments, 4 segments, and you get the stripe when you show that you can complete the segment perfectly, as good as possible. Whatever testing, say you do 1 to 10, that's, less refined. 1 to 100 is more refined. And then you can do 1 to 200, break it down into smaller segments. And this is like, say, for a 7th degree black belt, you have 200 components of the form. You have to move that refined. So for a white belt, it's 1 to 10. For a black belt, it's 1 to 100. For a 2nd degree black belt, it's 1 to 150. For a 3rd degree black belt, it's 1 to 200. You're refining all the smallest of details of the body. For a 4th degree, it's 1 to 300 components. You're looking at 300 components of movement. And now you videotape it and you break it down. And you score them. So you're not going to score them right then and there. You're going to break it down, and you can use the AI to eventually do this testing and score them right away. It takes the video, and then the artificial intelligence goes through it, and it identifies each and segments out the film, and you give them the score. You scored a 250 out of 300. And I don't know what's passing. 275 out of 300 is passing. You have to figure out your range of what you consider passing. And here are the 25 where you missed. But for a 5th degree, it's 1 out of 400. Even more refined in detail. And you can use video and artificial intelligence working with it and each of these movements, that is perfect. So you do each movement and you define it, and it takes you setting and building this training up and this scoring up. And this is what they don't do, and they can check the judges with their scoring, say for figure skating. And so at the Olympics, they have the most highest score, or the world championships. They have the refinement of the detail of the movement has to be so precise, and they score the judges and train the judges to spot this, and the judges use the video to score them. And so it's going to take a little longer, a little bit of training, but it's supposed to get better and better. The Olympics got to raise their standards. You don't stay, a perfect 10 today is way more refined than a perfect 10. And so you break it down to increments. So one is 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, and then 1. And it's broken down into 4. So now it's a scale of 40, really. And they break it down into these 4 quarters of the movement now for the floor exercise. Because they have much more strength and conditioning and everything else, and the Olympics has to constantly require higher standards and more precision of their athletes. More perfection constantly. And this keeps people coming back to the Olympics because it just keeps on getting better and better and better. So a perfect 10 today is way beyond Natalie Comaneci, and then Mary Lou Retton did it for the United States. She was the next one. First, Nadia Comaneci, and I watched Nadia do the perfect 10. And then I watched the Olympics and saw Mary Lou Retton do the perfect 10, both on the floor exercises. So again, it needs to move up in perfection. So you break it down in the quarters. And then after 5 years or 10 years, you break those quarters down into quarters. So it's 0.125. And so 12.5. Now you're breaking it down into eighths. 1/8. And you have to score 1 through 8, and you got to hit on all of them to get 1 point. You broke it down into even finer detail. So again, that propels the Olympics further. And the judges have the training for the new scoring or refinement system. And it constantly forces man to evolve. You have evolution and then revolution when you change it. So they get to prepare for the new 8th thing. So you're going to bring it in the tournaments and refine them and get them to know, and eventually roll it out into the Olympics. But it takes years for them to get used to it and refine. So before you move to the 4ths, from the 4ths to the 8ths, or you can move from the 4ths to the 1/6, and from the 1/6 to the 1/8, and so on. Eventually you'll be at the 1/16. So keeping up and forcing mankind to be better. Forcing mankind to perfect themselves. To push the envelope of who we are and where we are. And that's what's supposed to be happening, and that's what God planned for you. To keep on pushing this envelope of evolution and revolution of the species. You're supposed to be getting better and better. You weren't supposed to destroy me. You were supposed to prepare me and push me to the envelope to see how far and how perfect a human can be, setting the standards for everybody to come after. But what you did is you went satanic, giving them excuses, not pushing mankind and demanding greater of them. You went the other way, and you want to require less of them, pushing us into garbage. That's not what's supposed to be happening. With all modern food technology, modern exercise technology, strength and conditioning, massage therapy, and all this, and all these other forms of training, you're supposed to be pushing it to this incredible and you're supposed to be moving the people of the United States. It's a competitive world. And we're supposed to be moving ourselves into that state, constantly requiring more from your people. That means they can take in information and knowledge. We do this, right? You have to pass first grade to get into second grade. You have to pass second grade to get into third grade. And then eventually you have to graduate from elementary school to get into high school. And then you got to pass freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and senior. And I do believe in flunking people. They need to be held back if they're not performing. Now, you get outside work and try to get help to not flunk them, but sometimes you need to hold them back if they can't meet it. You don't pass them and push garbage out into the world. They're held back and they're further developed. So you might hold them back a year or two, but that's fine. They might age out of sports because they're still in high school. You hold them back for a year, and that means they're in high school for 5 years. Like the NCAA has 4 years plus 1 redshirt year. 5 years you can play college sports for. But they can age out of high school sports. So they can go to a community college and play, but they can't be part of the community college until they graduate high school. But they can no longer play in high school sports. They aged out. So, again, keeping the competition fair. So, again, pushing the standards of what mankind can be and constantly pushing it forward. And you're not doing that. And that's what God expected you to do with me. Pushing it forward. Getting me to be all I can be. Not going in with the satanic security and the satanic police and trying to make somebody a sicko. That's not what they do in therapy unless you're Hannibal, the cannibal, and you take your patients in and you make them sick individuals. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. That violates all of the psychological, truly, the Hippocratic Oath and everything else. You're supposed to be taking your patients in and making them healthy, not taking somebody in and destroying them. You're supposed to be taking them in and making them stronger and better and quicker and faster and smarter. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And if you've done the opposite to me, well, you just set the world on fire. because I was supposed to be leading ethics, and I was leading ethics in financial service, setting whole new standards for morality, but not through, oh, we're going to deprive you, we're going to break you down, no. I get the CFA, I get my master's, I get my PhD, and I push the envelope. Like I showed you with Stephen Hawkins, how many honorariums he has and everything else. Pushing the envelope of what humans can be. And if he got healthy again, which the neurologists were supposed to be working on, he would have pushed the envelope even further, because Stephen Hawkins getting more energy, getting healthier. Do you know the output he would have put out if he was healthy? Unbelievable loss by not solving his spinal issue, giving him that added boost of energy every day, pushing him to a whole new state of health, unbelievably better health. Do you know what he would have put out every day, not being chronically fatigued from his paralysis? You look at his work and it would have been incredible. He would have done so much more for mankind, just like if Jesus would have lived. He would have did so much more, and the disciples would have done unbelievably more for mankind. And God wants you to make me unbelievably healthy and pushing the envelope of what mankind can be, setting the benchmark of incredible heights before I die. Heights that people like Michael Jordan, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And what do? They set these records, and people come in, and Mark Spitz in the Olympics, swimming, set all these records, and then he got by Phelps. Michael Phelps came, and he smashed those records, pushing it to a whole new level of standard for humans, a whole higher level of evolution of the human species. That's what was supposed to be happening. Some reason you teamed up with the devil and his demons to push it down into the ghetto. How evil individuals can be. And you've shown me that over the last 10 years with your evil, disgusting, filthy piece of garbage shit you've done. And I'm telling you, as God is my witness, and he is God, not Jesus, God the Father. God was Jesus's witness as well. Read the Bible and understand who's the witness. Jesus is not my witness. The Father is my witness. I don't atone or account to Jesus. I account to the Father. The child cannot judge me. You are judged by the child. I am not. God wants a higher standard. And you show your filth. The church has showed how disgustingly putrid it is, how filthy it is. And I look back in the church history and it makes me sick. I read the Bible and I get sick from the filth and disgust and disgrace. It makes me sick how wicked and sick they are. So make no mistake about it. You're supposed to be pushing a higher state of being. and seeing what mankind can be. Not taking something of beauty and destroying it and carving it up. That would only be satanic. But taking something of beauty and making it more beautiful. Do you go in and destroy the Mona Lisa? Or do you do lights and everything else to preserve it and shine the lights on it in proper ways for the Mona Lisa to look glorious in all its glory? And then figuring out how to position the lights even better to make the Mona Lisa look even more glorious. That's what's supposed to be happening. But some reason you decided to go with Satan and the demons and do the opposite and become unbelievable filth and disgust and disgrace in front of God's eyes, turning incredibly satanic, destroying and decaying and depriving and making unbelievable. So fix the problems.